You already said a few words about Alliance, but let me maybe present you quickly our organizations. As you said, we are one of the main publishers association in France. We represent 285 newspapers, employing around 10,000 journalists, which is approximately 42% of journalists in France. So we're clearly the main publishers association. Still circulating 5 million newspapers per day, and also almost 1 million per week, because we have quite a few weekly newspapers amongst our members. So to give you maybe a more concrete insight, amongst our members are the main French daily newspapers that you may know, such as Le Monde, Le Figaro, or Les Echos. We also have all daily regional newspapers, such as West France, for instance, the biggest newspaper in France in terms of circulation, or Nice Matin, or La Dépêche. On the lower right corner, you can see ultramarine newspapers. As you know, France has quite a lot of ultramarine territories, and you usually have information newspapers dedicated to it. And we also have this like 245 weekly newspapers, usually small companies, sometimes very small companies. And let's say the common feature between all our members, with no regards for the size, is this general and political information status, which is quite a big thing in France, because it gives you access, for instance, to public funding. Basically, it means that you have quite a broad newsroom, and that you cover every aspect of news, economical, social, political, local, national, and also international, of course. So it's sometimes quite difficult to have solidarity between all these different companies, but I'll get back to it. So maybe a few words on the economic situation of the French press, and maybe you will find common features with Japan. One of the thing that I want to say, because we sometimes are a little bit negative about the French press situation, that the public's appetite for news is clearly strong, stays strong, and even is growing. We can say that. As you can see, we are selling more subscriptions right now than 10 years ago, which may be counterintuitive, but that's reality. Of course, one of the problems is that you don't sell an online subscription at the same rate than a paper one. So that's, of course, one of our problems. And online too, we can see that there's really this strong appetite from public. Most of French population is reading our newspapers online, sometimes only once per month, but yeah, most of people are in contact with our news brands. And we could also add that, for instance, if you look at the top 20 French websites, around 10 of them are newspapers websites. So that's also a sign. I don't include in the top 20 big platforms websites such as Google, of course. If I do so, you won't find newspapers in the top 20. But amongst the French websites, clearly, news medias are very, very strong. But there's a but, of course, and I guess that's the same in most countries. The business model has a clear problem with declining revenues, because paper circulation is declining, because it's very difficult to monetize online, and costs that are mainly staying the same, because, as you know, the newspaper's economy is based mainly on fixed cost. So the two things are at stake for us: to be able to keep on printing and circulating physical newspapers for quite a long period of time. We don't expect paper to end in the 5 or 10 years. We expect it to last at least for 15 and 20 years that are in front of us. So we have to find ways to make it, if not profitable, at least balanced. And on the online side of things, we of course have to better monetize our content, and that's one of the points of neighboring rights and the negotiation we had with digital platforms. Speaking of digital platforms, one of the lesson we draw from the past years that they mainly capture newspapers on advertising revenues. What you see with this slide is that TV and radio, for instance, managed to keep their level of their share of the advertising market in France. The media that mainly suffered from the arrival of platforms is clearly Presse, because our advertising revenues were basically cut in half in 10 years, which is probably the main problem today of our business model. So this is, of course, not an isolated situation, and we can see more or less the same in every European country. And that led to the creation of a neighboring rights for press publishers through the now famous or infamous April 2019 copyright directive. That indeed created this property, this new neighboring right for publishers, but also through Article 17, that also led to a lot of debate, obliged platforms to seek agreements with right holders. Right holders being, of course, publishers, but not only. It can also be broadcasters, cinema producers, this kind of right holders. And you probably know it, but just as a recall, neighboring rights, it's not author rights. It's not dedicated to the primary authors that are journalists. It's a right dedicated to legal person who had a very significant influence in the creation of a work, such as news publishers, broadcaster, or music producers. So basically, what is protected by neighboring rights, and that was a hard point in the debate in Europe. You may, as a producer, as a publisher, protect basically the snippets you see on the right, the short extracts from press content that are indexed in search engines, for instance, or also reproduce through social networks. That means that, and that was really a hot debate, again, at the political level, you cannot protect very, very short extracts, such as isolated words or solely hyperlinks, but as long as you have a few words, an hyperlink, sorry, and sometimes a photograph, you can protect it, and the search engine or the social network is supposed to ask you for permission to use it. And this right is valid for 2 years, starting from the first online publication. It was a long fight, I said it, to create this right. I was not in the industry at that time, but every witness says the same, that the lobbying fight in Brussels was very, very hard, with platforms mobilizing European youth, funding trips to Brussels in order to demonstrate in front of the European Parliament. This kind of very harsh lobbying move. On the contrary, in France, we had a lot of support, and that led to a very, very quick transposition in French law of the directive. Actually, I think I've never seen a quicker transposition in French law, whereas in almost every other European state member, it took years to get at the same point, and some of them are not even done yet with transposition. And you can see on the left a tweet that I took as an illustration of the political fight. At that time, even some publishers fought against the creation of neighboring rights, saying that it was the end of freedom on the internet, and so on. So that gives you an insight of the extent of the lobbying of platforms. After transposition in France, almost immediately, Google basically blackmailed publishers, asking for the authorization to keep on using snippets. And basically that's the implementation of the directive. They were supposed to ask us for an authorization, but this authorization was for zero fee. Basically, Google said to publishers, please authorize me to keep on using your content for €0. If not, I will be forced to stop displaying your content in my search engine in order to comply with the directive and law. Of course, our publisher had no choice. Around 60% in average of their website traffic is coming from Google search engine. So basically they said, yes, okay, you can do it, but we feel it's an abuse of dominant position. So in parallel, we seize the French Competition Authority. I will get into details, but it took 2 decisions, 2 years, and as you can see a 500 million euros fine to get back to the negotiation table through reasonable terms. And finally, at the end of last year and beginning of this year, we reached deals with Google and with Facebook. So with the main 2 platforms using press content today. So maybe to get a little bit into details in the Google case, which was, as stated, a blend of litigation and negotiation, going to court, going to the negotiation table, going back to court, and so on for 2 years. There was this first scene of Google with the blackmail I was mentioning, and we had a very quick first decision from the French Competition Authority. Again, a lot of political will clearly in this decision to help publishers get the law applied. Basically, we had negotiation. We started negotiation following this first decision with Google, but quite quickly we understood that the aim of the other party was to gain time, and I wouldn't say to circumvent the law, but to have a minimal implementation of law. As an example, Google struck an appeal against this French Competition Authority decision. So at the end of 2020, at the end of the summer, we seized again the Competition Authority, saying your April decision is not implemented and is not respected by Google. And around the same time, we won in front of the Paris Court of Appeal. But at that time, Google announced a deal with Le Monde, Le Figaro, and Libération, which are 3 of the Alliance members. So they managed to divide us. Le Figaro got back on board of the collective negotiation afterwards. But clearly, at that time, we were weakened by these agreements. We signed a first agreement in 2021, in January, knowing that it was not fully satisfactory and knowing that it may be It may not be implemented because of the litigation going on in front of the French Competition Authority. And we were right because this first agreement was never really implemented until July 2021, and this massive fine. I think it was really a record at the time as a provisional measures decision. And that led finally to a satisfactory negotiation with Google. The deal with Facebook that we signed in December 2021 was also, I think, some kind of stimulating event for Google. And in February of this year, we finally reached a deal with Google. So where are we now? As I said, these two deals are currently being implemented. More quickly, of course, with the Facebook deal because it was signed before. And currently, our publishers are getting money for neighboring rights from Google and from Facebook. And we are currently negotiating with Microsoft on LinkedIn. As you're probably aware, Microsoft has really was really loud in its public communication to fund, to show positiveness to publishers and to say that they wanted to fund online press content. So now we're at it, and we will see if the words are implemented. And there is also this specific feature in the European directive and the French law that journalists must get an appropriate and fair share of neighboring rights. It's quite unusual, it's quite new because journalists already get author rights in France. So a few years ago, publishers signed deals with journalist organizations in order to determine that the level of that author rights. So we are back at the negotiation table with journalist organizations, mainly in each newspaper, except for the regional weekly press I was mentioning at the beginning, because there are mainly small and very small businesses, so it makes no sense to have a negotiation at the company level, and we have a branch negotiation, industry level negotiation for these publishers. What we are quite happy with is that the agreements we signed are clearly creating these new rights, new neighboring rights that was previously only on papers. So at some point you have to determine and to negotiate what is this neighboring rights, what are the rights you're giving to the platforms, what are the rights you're not giving to them, what services are concerned, what services and users are not concerned, and so on. So, and that's not only a matter of fighting with platform. There is really we really had to think of it. How do we characterize juridically the use by Facebook and the use by Google, for instance, which are very different. One of the first things, for instance, that Facebook told us that we were the ones uploading press content on their platform. And that's true, they were right. It's publishers that were, and also users, but in the first place, publishers are uploading their content to Facebook. So one of the first things, for instance, is that Facebook told us, we don't want to have a fee mechanism aligned with the uploading of articles. You cannot ask us to pay each time you're uploading an article because you decide when you're uploading articles. So we have to find other ways to determine the level of fees that Facebook should pay to publishers. Another point we're quite happy with is the fact that it's both are solidarity agreements between our publishers. Of course, they're taking these agreements regarding the level of fees are taking into account online audiences, also on Facebook, for instance, like and shares from users. So they are linked. The fees are linked with the size and the economical success of the publisher. Our publishers were legitimately expecting that. But we also had to take care of smallest publishers, because some of the smallest are very small online, and some of them are not even really present online yet, are only beginning. So we had to find a way that they took interest in our agreements and weren't ending with a $0 or I don't know $10 fees for the use of their content. So we had to determine mechanism to have minimal level of fees. We have different mechanism in the case of Google and in the case of Facebook, but we're quite happy with it, and we think our small publishers are also quite happy with what they get in the end. So that's the first step in rebalancing the sharing of online value. That's not the only one. That's not the end of the story. Maybe in the future we will get more money from neighboring rights. And there is still probably a problem with the online advertising market, beside publishers and the funding of news and journalism. There is clearly a competition problem on that market, and the litigation we see in the US, led by US states, is showing quite clear testimonies regarding that matter, with ex-employees from Google and Facebook clearly saying there is a problem, and the online advertising market is manipulated. So again, it's not the end of the story, and we hope to have better news, at least coming from the US, in the future. What did we learn from these negotiations? First, we really believe in Europe, and especially in France, in intellectual property. I could almost say there is a cult of intellectual property in France. What this negotiation showed is that in the case of press publishers and platforms, it's not enough. It's a very useful tool, because publishers were able to say, this is my content and you must ask my authorization to use it. But it's not enough, because the unbalance in terms of competition is so big that once you're in a closed rooms with negotiators, the first thing they tell you is law is unapplicable. We can't implement it. So let's make another deal rather between us. So it's a very long fight to get them to apply the law, acknowledge they're using press content with economical profit, and that they should pay for neighboring rights. And again, we must understand that it's also a state of mind. Platforms build their models on the fact that they use content produced by other people, not by them, and they're making money of it without ever funding said content. So it's really a long stretch to get them to think otherwise, and to make exceptions to that model. And another difficulty was that, as I said, when you're giving, at least in French and European intellectual property rights, when you're giving a license, you're putting everything in that license. You're mentioning every authorized use, and anything that is not mentioned in the license, the platform is not authorized for. And of course, digital platforms are on that matter again on a very different state of mind. They're trying to get license for everything, everywhere, and every time, basically. And that's linked to again, their model. There are technology companies, so they feel they must be able to evolve permanently. For instance, Google was telling us, we can't say that our search engine features will be the same in 6 months or 1 year from now. We can't commit to that because it's ever evolving. And they were quite right on that. You can't say, as a publisher from a said country, that Google must freeze every technological evolution because you're giving them a license. That does not work. So we had to find ways, compromise, and ways to get beyond that. And the last lesson is that we had this original way of dealing with neighboring rights, which is collective bargaining by the Alliance. We negotiated principles, respect of principles for the account of publishers, fees, of course, and a model, a dedicated model of neighboring rights license that Google and Facebook committed to present to our publishers. But after that, the publisher gets free again to negotiate whatever he wants, to sign the license that Google or Facebook is presenting to him, to renegotiate it if he wants, or to refuse it. So that's collective bargaining leading to individual managing of rights. That's not full individual negotiation, and that's not collective management of property rights as we usually intended. And it was quite effective, but maybe in the future our publishers will get back to collective management. We will see, for instance, for online crawlers that are players that are quite difficult to catch. Maybe we will go through a collective management society. We don't know yet. And that's about it. So I hope I was quite clear. If you have questions, I'm at your disposition, of course.